experience. We're going to record it. We might try to broadcast it as well live, but yeah, we usually have technical problems. So hopefully that it will work today. So I'm just going to start recording, and I'm going to shift to Arabic. Okay. Okay. يعني أرحب بالجميع.
I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for coming. Before we start, I just want to draw your attention that there are small changes to the program. Ambassador Ahmed Al-Alim Al-Suso will not be able to join us because of force majeure compelling reasons, the sudden death of her nephew. May God have mercy on him. Just some logistical information before we start. Translation is available. It's very important that you choose the language in which you want to hear the discussion today. And please choose either English or Arabic. And it's also very important that we are trying always to make the space for participation safe for women. So if you are exposed to any threats or any kind of dangers due to participating with us, please contact us and tell us about any incident that you may have experienced. I'm pleased to welcome everyone to this virtual meeting, which is held in parallel with the Women's Summit in Aden, that is organized by Wojood Foundation for Human Security with the support from Friedrich Ebert Foundation, which is held for the fourth time, and it is hosting women leaders from all governorates of Yemen. More than 100 women started today this summit, and it will continue until tomorrow. Since last year, in the Peace Track initiative, we have decided to support this summit virtually in order to expand the participation and engage women from inside and to connect women from inside and outside. We wanted to reflect the joint coordination and the strategic work we have. This year, we are carrying out this task in partnership with the International Network of Civil Society Organizations, ICANN, and the International Women's League for Peace and Freedom, with support from the Norwegian Agency for Development and the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today's meeting is very special. It includes important regional and international feminist voices who will share their experiences and expertise in the field of feminist peacemaking in the region. This year, the National Feminist Summit focuses on evaluating the international role and the Women's Peace Map that was launched last June. And we have worked on different stages to develop this draft. It was launched in last June. It was the work for 2 years with more than 30 women leaders. And after that, we cooperated with 9 local organizations led by women to conduct consultations and to focus on different topics in order to expand the map that focused on the detainees, transitional justice, local peace, as well as the salaries, the issue of salaries. And now the current phase is in cooperation with Wojood Human Security. We have managed to conduct 10 meetings or workshops for verification and to examine the contents of the Feminist Roadmap in 10 governorates. It was led by local women, the women leaders at the local level, and it included broad participation from the local communities, representatives of local authorities, security leaders, civil society, as well as different groups that are interested in the contents of the map. We are still here trying to expand the participation in the development of this roadmap, and we are open to all political and civil components, and we want to conduct more meetings about the roadmap to make sure that this roadmap fulfills the aspirations of the Yemeni people who want to live in peace and freedom. And we want all parties in the negotiations and mediation, we want them to use this roadmap as a platform and as a strategic guidance for the peace process so we can achieve sustainable and fair peace. And now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers, the panelists in the opening session. First of all, I'd like to invite Mr. Achim Vogt. He is the non-resident director of Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and he is responsible for the regional project for peace and security. Achim, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rasha. I don't really want to take the floor for long because this is not my panel. I'm happy that Friedrich Ebert Stiftung is actually supporting the fourth Feminist Summit as we have supported the first three summits since 2018. Let me just say, as a member of or representative of a German foundation, we are celebrating today the 50 years since Willy Brandt got, as a social democrat, the Nobel Peace Prize for his policy against Eastern Europe during the Cold War. And I was just going through the list of Nobel Peace laureates, and it's interesting to see that things have changed since then. 15 out of the 18 women who have been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize have been awarded that prize after 1971. It's still a long way, that's very clear. It's still too few of them, but it is a change, hopefully. Secondly, we have had all kinds of reports and resolutions, notably, of course, resolution 1325 that we all know, but also the Arab Human Development Report, the first one of which in 2002 already demanded the full empowerment of women. I like actually Sanam's background here, which says she builds peace. And I think that is so important if we look at the situation worldwide, and if we look at the situation also from the fact that war as a means of politics has, not only in Yemen, not only in many parts of the Middle East. I see Zahra here who can report on the situation in Libya, obviously, and there are so many others in the region. But there is also Ethiopia. There are actually conflicts that are coming up militarily in the middle of Europe. Again, Russia against Ukraine, only one to be mentioned here. So this having said, I think it's so much more important to bring more women in the literal sense of the word to the front lines in peacemaking. That having said, let me just say very quickly, most of you know Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, so I don't really have to present it. We have around 100 offices around the world, 11 of them in the Middle East and North Africa. And since 1999, we do have an office in the old city of Sana'a. In 2021, we opened a branch office in Aden as well. And actually, my background picture, I took it myself in Sana'a. It is the view from our office in the old city. We do work with non-governmental organizations, academic institutions, and think tanks, but also with government institutions if they are ready and willing to reform and do the right steps to a progressive development. And that is what we have been doing in Yemen, in all parts of the country, and in most countries of the Middle East and North Africa, for that matter. One thing I have mentioned this morning in the opening was that the new German government, and I'm happy to say that, so to say, our Olaf Scholz, a social democrat, will be the new chancellor of Germany from today. But more importantly for this meeting now is the fact that it's for the first time in the history of Germany that we have a government which is comprised of 8 women and 8 men as ministers. It has been a bumpy, a steep uphill battle in Germany. And if it has been a bumpy and uphill battle in Germany, we can imagine how difficult it is in other countries. So that also just as a little push and thumbs up to the situation in Yemen. I'm very happy that we have been partnering with Wojood for human security in this for the last couple of years. We are hoping to continue this also with a lot of follow-up activities. I'm happy to be with you, and without taking more of the floor, thank you very much, Rasha, for having me tonight.
Thank you very much, Achim. And yes, in fact, Friedrich Ebert is a pioneer in supporting the agenda for peace and security in Yemen. And I remember a discussion I had with Ariel Gross in Lebanon in 2016, I believe. We were talking about the importance of convening a summit for women. And I'm very happy that that changed from words to actions. Thank you very much for that support. And now I move to introduce, I have the pleasure to introduce dear Salma Khala. She is the acting director of the Middle East and North Africa program at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She is a Syrian feminist and civil activist and leader working in the field of social justice in the feminist field for more than 15 years. She previously headed the Dawlati Foundation as executive director, which is a Syrian organization working in the field of memory preservation and comprehensive justice. And she worked on preparing national policies for the protection of children and youth mobilization. Dear Salma, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rasha, and I'm going to speak in English if that's okay. I just first of all, I just want to say how proud WILF is to support this gathering of regional women peace builders and human rights advocates. It's a space that PTI and Wojood have created to share reflections, experiences, and expertise by women who have been in the peace processes and at the margins of peace processes across the Middle East and North Africa. And it's a very important and vital space. It's important for women from the MENA region and across different regions to create these spaces and opportunities for discussion and deliberation. These are spaces in which we can produce new knowledge, recenter our experiences and narratives, and through which we can create the ground for collaboration and joint action. There is so much that you all can learn from each other, and we can all learn from each other, and that you can teach the world. That there's so much that you have to say collectively, and that we have to say as women peace builders collectively to the various stakeholders that design, implement, and fund peace processes, about what a peace process should look like. And I know that Yemeni women, with the leadership of strong community activists, politicians, and feminist organizations like PTI and Wojood, have already shown us that when we work together and think together, we can reimagine a peace process, and you have delivered an alternative roadmap for peace which does that. As women from the MENA region, we're each learning new lessons every time, often hard lessons, as our countries go through conflict and through different peace processes and reiterations of these political and processes. Often these lessons are not carried over to new contexts. And often the new processes are created, taking some of these bad practices across region and again. And often these lessons are not being carried over by the people who designed these processes. So it's really up to us to actually take those lessons forward, work together to build on them, and make sure that that issues of tokenization, of marginalization of women, of exclusive processes are not replicated, and that our inputs and critiques are taken into account within our own countries, but also across into new countries. This regional discussion builds a really important additional layer of collaboration to the one that Yemeni women have already started with the Feminist Roadmap for Peace. And it can hopefully build a base for further collective organizing and action for feminist peace in the region. So thank you for creating this space, and I look forward to hearing the discussions.
شكرا سلمى.
Thank you very much, Salma. And first of all, I'd like to thank you because you raised some very important points. Networking at the regional and international level is something very important, and we have learned a lot from each other. And today, we hope that it is a new point of regional partnership in order to conduct some feminist summit at the regional level. I move now to Sinam Anderlini. She is the head of ICANN, and she heads the Center for Women, Peace and Security, and she is an expert in strategic peace. She worked in peace and security for more than 2 decades, and she has membership of the British Empire. Thank you, Sinam. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rasha. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. I wanted to just situate this whole discussion around inclusivity, women's involvement, feminist approaches to peace by actually saying that, going back 25 years, when I was 26 years old, working in London as an Iranian, I was involved in the mobilization for 1325 and what we have as the Women, Peace and Security agenda. My Iranian background, the fact that I'd experienced the revolution was pivotal in shaping my views on how we take things forward. So when I think about bringing it back to the Middle East, this is really important. These issues were not imported to us from the Western world. They actually grew from our region and from the challenges that we had, whether it was in Palestine, Iraq, as I say, Iran, Afghanistan, and so forth. So I think that's really both on a personal level, but also to remind ourselves that the West followed. We led and the West followed. And I think this is important to raise. The second point I wanted to make is that there's a tendency to think that, when women come to the peace table, it's for peace for women only, as if we only look at the world in these narrow silos, which is the way the rest of the world sometimes tries to situate us as women. They, sideline and side event women consistently, as if we can only talk about women's issues. In my experience in 25 years working globally, and now as at ICANN, we have a network, the Women's Alliance for Security Leadership, that both Rasha and Raja and others are members of, and we're very proud to be partners with. I have never met women peace builders who only talk about women. Women peace builders always talk about peace for everyone. Feminist peace is not just the opportunity for me or any of us to be somewhere. It is genuinely about saying we don't want our boys going to war either. It's a very holistic approach to thinking about peace for all. The third point that I wanted to raise is that a feminist peace lens that we see, and I think we see it in the incredible work of the roadmap and the work that Zara is doing and Russia's been doing in Syria, and we're hearing about this idea of inclusion. Number one is really important, and consultation. But what we see over and over again is that women peace builders take on the responsibility to protect communities. We are situated and we're dealing with wars right now where whether you're a government actor or you're an armed actor, your target are civilians. The majority of people being killed are actually children in many of our countries. And the people that we bring to the table who are the armed actors are themselves complicit in that violence. So they don't have any credibility to be sitting there speaking about the civilian population because they're actually killing them. So what we see on the flip side of it is women peace builders bring this perspective and consistently are going back and forth and bringing the issues and concerns of that constituency. So I think that a key message for me, and I hope that we take this into 2022, is that we need independent women peace builders delegations in every peace talks that is happening. And we can talk about what criteria we think about in terms of who is a peace builder and so forth, but we've done a lot of that work already collectively. They need to be there as independent actors, not stuck in other people's delegations. Another aspect of this is that, and we see this in the roadmap as well as again in all the work that others will be hearing about. There's a tendency to frame mediation work as there was a conflict in the past, and that past is defining the future. The perspective that women bring, and feminist perspectives, is often what's the future we want? And we start from there. What's the imagined future, the collective future, the shared concerns that we have, even across different kind of parties, if you want, or different sides of the conflict. Often, if you frame it around what do you want for your daughters and sons, which is a, sounds very essentialist from a parental perspective, but this idea of what do we want for the future, letting that shape the present is one of the key aspects of I think what feminists bring to the talks. And then a couple of things I wanted to say. I've been immersed in, as my colleagues know, we have been heavily immersed in the debacle of what became the Afghan process. And it's not to say that feminists or Afghan women's activists were pro-military presence in their country. It was a consistent demand to say they wanted to be in the political processes. The failure of Afghanistan was a failure of the political process and the stonewalling of women. And if there's one good thing that should come out of this terrible tragedy, is that we should be learning that Yemen, Syria, Libya, anywhere we have peace talks right now, any government that claims to have a feminist foreign policy, that claims to support women, peace and security, etc., should be insisting and demanding that the peace processes have independent women's delegations at the table and that women peace builders are being heard. If we had listened to Afghan women 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, about civilian protection, about rights, about what the Taliban is doing, we would not be here where we are now. So I think that's something that we should bring forward. And I want to end with one thought. Certainly Western philosophical thinking is imbued with the Hobbesian notion that human nature is violent by design, or by nature humanity is violent. I think when you flip the coin and you put on the lens and you look at even the most horrific war zones from the experiences of women and ordinary people living, men and women on the ground, you see that actually human nature is not violent. When we try, the majority of us are consistently trying to coexist, to compromise, to negotiate, to find peaceful solutions. There is a minority of people who perpetuate violence, who benefit from violence, and who co-opt and coerce our sons and daughters into becoming violent. We must not let that minority continue to dominate the way we think about conflict, the way we think about peace, and so forth. And so I want to end with it. Hobbes is wrong, and feminist perspectives prove that. And I hope that this conversation can carry on and that we can take it into a global space moving forward. And Akeem, thank you for liking my background. We have a global campaign now called She Builds Peace. It's all over in 40 countries. And we have really pretty logos and all sorts of things that we're happy to share with everybody to participate in any way they want, because we think it should be from the ground up right now. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا سنام.
Thank you very much, Sanam, and you have raised some very important points concerning Afghanistan. Yes, it was for us something that caused us some desperation and loss of hope as peacemakers, but it's very important to continue, because we have to change how the world is thinking in order to protect ourselves and to protect the interests of our communities. And now we move to the panel discussion. I invite my dear mother, Huria Mashhour, to moderate the session. She is a member of the National Accord Movement, and she is a member of the Women's Advisory Group of the Special Envoy Office, and she was the Minister of Human Rights during the transitional period after the Arab Spring, and she was the spokesperson for the Peaceful Revolution Forces. She also worked for more than a decade as a deputy chairperson for the National Women Committee, and she chaired it for 1 year before she resigned in a protest over the use of violence against peaceful protesters in 2011. My mother, please.
شكرا جزيلا. وبداية أنا الحقيقة سعيدة وفخورة فيكم كلكم النساء العربيات والشركاء الدوليين. سنام من آيكان، أخيم من فريدريش إيبرت، وفخورة جدا بهذا العمل الذي تعملون. نحن نحتاج الحقيقة للتضامن لنكون معا في قضية.
I'm very proud of the work you are doing, and the world is living in unprecedented tensions. We in the Middle East and we are living in exceptional circumstances, but the world is also on the edge. So there are injustices everywhere, and with the support of everyone and human rights activists, I think we can overcome all the challenges. Thank you very much, and I will not take much of your time. I'll start with the first speaker. We have Maha Awad. Thank you, Ms. Maha, for the excellent work you are doing for in the preparations of the fourth Feminist Summit. Thank you for presenting the Feminist Roadmap in more than one governorate at the same time in 10 governorates. So the Feminist Roadmap is a very important tool for us as women, and it's very important for the society at large because it's a guidance for everyone. It's about the peace that we want, a fair and inclusive peace, a peace that does not exclude any party, a peace for everyone in order to get out of this war to the open horizons of peace. Ms. Maha worked for a very long time in the Women National Committee, and she worked with the United Nations, the UNDP. She's the head of Wojood Human Security Foundation, and she's still working also for the Women National Committee, and she is a researcher in transitional justice and in the women's rights. She is a very strong defender of women's rights. Ms. Maha, please tell us about the Feminist Roadmap and the fourth Feminist Summit. What are the key issues that you have deliberated? And you have 10 minutes.
مرحبا جميعا.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much. Today I felt the momentum, a very strong momentum that we had in the Feminist Summit, especially the number of people who participated. I have just arrived home after we concluded the first day of the summit. We have had a presence of more than 200 participants, and this is very important. Of course, we had worries and concerns about controlling this large number of people, but it was very smooth, and the presence was amazing today. So first of all, I introduce myself. I'm Maha Awad. I'm the head of Wojood Human Security Foundation, and I'm the coordinator for the Feminist Summit. Thank you for the introduction, Ms. Huria. And I'd like to thank the Peace Track Initiative for the second year. We feel that you are with us in the Feminist Summit. We are conducting this very important summit, and we are meeting with you virtually, and this is something very important for us because the feminist movement is a platform to deliver the voices of women on different issues and the human rights issues, the voices of women concerning political and peace issues, as well as human rights issues, and to show that there is the right participation of women, so women manage to prove themselves and to create the spaces for themselves.
خاصة طالما يجمعهن هدف واحد.
They bring one goal, brings them together, that is for peace, endeavoring for peace. And I believe that this is a strength from which we are emerging in our struggle for peace. Of course, the issues that has been discussed today in the first day of the summit were in fact the opening session. Then we have been talk about the women endeavors for peace and the local communities or within the partnership with the international community. or the different local initiatives for peace, also within the efforts conducted by the women-led organizations for the women feminist movement. What we are endeavoring for through this feminist summit as strategic goal each year, 2 years, is to support the women feminist movement and how effective they could be in building peace and and for building the state in general, social issues, economic and social issues related to the state building. The roadmap also was a major part in our today's program, and has been introduced on what has been addressed in the we have presented the roadmap and discussed it at 10 governorates: Lahat, Hajjat, Bala, Abiyan, Taiz, and also cannot remember all the governorates, but however, there are 10 governorates. Women from these communities talked about and led the local consultations to discuss the roadmap, and not only by women, but also by local community leaders, representative of local authorities, media, community-based organizations, CSOs, at the 10 governorates level, which has resulted in very amazing outcomes on developing and enriching this roadmap. First of all of them has praised this feminist activity, which should be supported and to continue and to be successful. Also, there were some interaction to in enriching this roadmap with some inputs and proposals, recommendations. I would like to praise what has been mentioned by when addressing the loopholes, or rather the variables rather in the situation during preparing the roadmap, and all were very much interested in participating from these different governorates. They have shown their interest in the roadmap and said this is really important. The other thing is that there is when declare a mechanism to include women demands in participation, and this has been developed by one of the activists, this proposal, and our partners in the CSOs in Eden. That's to have women to have wherever there is a president, the vice president should be a woman, and wherever there is a chairwoman, there should be a chairman. So this what should support this proposal, because this will enable women at this phase, considering the complexity in the current situation. But however, women has proved an extraordinary role and contributed greatly to continue their march, although you have many things yet to be done. I would like to address what have been discussed in today's summit, assessing the role of the UN envoy and declare the different feedback from women and youth, which were very, very important outcomes. That is, the current UN envoy should come up with new way or mechanism to initiate a comprehensive mediation that consider gender equality, and also very important to develop a mechanism to involve women more, being considering the balance in this equation, noting this monopoly in peace process between different conflicting parties. So we have to impose civil voices, and we believe that women should be represented in this participation in this process, and different representatives should be taken into account by different women categories, and this should be more inclusive. Of course, women has expressed also their denounce today for the absence of the envoy from, although he confirmed that he's going, although we sent him an invitation and encouraged him to participate with us in this today's summit, because it was like 200 women were participating from different backgrounds, different governorates of the country were going to participate, and it would have been a great chance for him to to meet them, but he refused, unfortunately. So the women has expressed their dissatisfaction or denounce for this absence by the UN envoy for today's summit, and lack of interaction or to develop new mechanism in his work. Also, the apologies was very disappointing. In fact, because the envoy, unfortunately, now is organizing his office a number of women now who traveled from Yemen to attend the meeting at the envoy office. Why it would have been better that he will be with us among 200 women from the field, because what we lack really, and there is gap in fact between linking the or lack of gap of communication between the envoy, UN envoy, and to link it with the local, with the mediation effort is undertaken with the women in the ground. It's not sufficient to have one meeting there. This is in brief what we would like to share with you about first day of our summit, and we're going to follow up and continue tomorrow also. Wish you all the success, and these are really an extraordinary efforts by having this also this virtual summit to our this fourth feminist summit. Thank you, Ms. Maha, for your presentation, very interesting presentation about your efforts at the national level in Yemen, and you are working now, in fact, in very exceptional conditions. In fact, the UN envoy office, even if he is busy or for any reason whatsoever, or his schedule is busy maybe, but at least he should delegate one of them from the envoy office to participate in this feminist summit, which included many governorates, males and females participated from different governorates, youth, etc. He should have delegated someone to represent the UN envoy office, because this is his role. He's one of the major player in Yemeni affairs now. So thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to move now to Miss Magda Sanusi. In fact, we have good relations with Magda Sanusi in Yemen, very deep-rooted relations with Magda Sanusi. Magda she is half Yemenis, I would say, because she has been with us since long time in Yemen. That time we live in difficult situation that time, and we needed that time support from international organizations. Same what she's doing now. She's networking, she was cooperating from different international organizations. She used to work with Oxfam UK in Yemen office. We did together a great deal of work, and she came, and the Yemeni community was very prepared and in that. And Dr. Ufa Hassan, that time, may her soul rest in peace, in Women Center for Research at San University. She faced many difficulties that time, and they have had to close the center, and she had to leave the country. Then she came to Yemen, Magda, and started to work with the National Committee as policymaker. At the Yemen Women National Committee, we have been drawing the development policies for women. Developing these policies, we have faced many challenges. I've been working together to support Oxfam activities, and which is led by Majid Sanusi Al-Raji Khana, to support us in the gender in the fifth year policy, fifth year plan policy, to be gender sensitive. This was the first time, particularly in the two socially accepted sectors in education and health. And the other issue is that, which has been raised that time, despite the many challenges that time, we have waged a campaign, and we have established SEMA network to combat violence against women, in particular the minor marriage or underage marriage. You have faced many challenges, of course. We have been scolded or defamed at the mosques as either the Ramzia Irani, may her soul rest in peace, the chairwoman of the Yemeni Women Union, and me, Rashid Al-Hamdani, as well, because we are doing something which are against the norms of the community and society. And why we raising this issue, it is accepted, you are westernized, etc. Now, with the challenge we are facing now in our country is much bigger than before. They are facing the women, and also facing the whole community. We all going through a transformation period. Miss Majd is going to talk about her Sudanese women experience, particularly now in this transitional period. Sudan has witnessed a revolution against al-Bashir regime, and now is passing through transitional period. Of course, there are so many challenges before this transitional period. What is the role of Yemeni women? Majda Sunus is going to speak about that. The floor is yours, please. Go ahead. Thank you so much, Horia. I'm very happy to see you again and see Rasha and other friends. Sanam, I'm really happy for this invitation. I would like to thank you for that and for remembering or recalling these good memories and the ongoing struggle. As I can see, thank you so much. I'm really happy to talk in brief about the Sudanese revolution. After early separation, the pension retirement for nations, I thought I'm going to rest and enjoy my pension, but unfortunately, and live normal life, but far from political issues. But unfortunately, I couldn't. I went to my homeland, and the revolution was at its a top success, as Ms. Suhouria mentioned. Sudan revolution has been narrated by all parts of the world about the Sudanese Kandakat, or the women who led this revolution, and which in 2018 and continued 2019, this revolution continued, and then the Sudanese managed to produce the transitional constitution for transitional period. This Sudan was facing major challenges before that, not only from the deep state, but also by some peace issues. Sudan is suffering from wars in Darfur, continued for long period, where massacres committed, atrocities were committed in southern Kordofan, in Nuba Mountains. Many conflicts erupted there, armed conflicts, I would say. So the Sudanese revolution, we have 3 words, which mean a lot for Sudanese people, women and men, which is freedom, peace, and justice. Freedom with emancipation from after dictator regime continued for 30 years. Peace, because country suffered from wars, and justice and transitional justice, of course, for people to attain justice in general. This has been materialized, this slogan has been materialized for 3 words in the transitional constitution. And Sudan, maybe unlike the other transitional countries, the transitional was unique in itself, meaning that the regime was split or divided to partnership between the military junta and the civilians, because military are part of the structure of the state as represented by the sovereign council. I would like to point out that so many gains that has been made after the revolution that women have struggled for in the transitional constitutions, like women representative in the legislative board, 40%, in the establishment of the women commission. Even women that doesn't have ministry or commission, supreme commission, they have 30 years, they have only federation, Yemeni Women Federation. It is affiliated to the former regime to remove all discrimination against women, eliminating all discrimination against women during the transitional period. Although it is continued for 2 years, women managed to also to achieve many gains. For instance, the general or public order law, one of the most oppressive laws for the women freedoms. It was enacted by the former regime, and they just dictating women how to dress, how to behave. So this law has been invalidated. The second law, which is incriminating of the female genital mutilation, one of the most important issues and most important impedance to development. It is kind of violence against women. Women also manage to develop or to produce a law to incriminate the female genital mutilation, which is banned by the law now. After that, the situation was quite complicated. It's not transitional period just to and working hard to create the civil state and the transition, democratic transition. The country was not in dictatorship for 30 years, but the challenges of peace agreements and peace deals, the mediator in our peace agreement between different factions and the government of Sudan was the Southern Sudan government, was the mediator. Within this context, women were active very strongly in participating in the track 2, that's CSOs in the first phase, and then in talking with one of the most important negotiator, because they are occupying one of the liberated in Jibal Nuba mountain and southern Kordofan. This is one of the very important steps in Juba, not in Khartoum. So women managed to participate and get involved through track 2, met with all decision makers from both sides, trying to reach and to develop their own feminist agenda. What do they want to see in the peace agreement? How to peace agreement could be gender sensitive to respond to their aspirations, particularly issues related to transitional justice, security issues, and women participation or share in wealth, women participation in power, etc., to remove or eliminate all forms of violence against women, or and all this were about 30 women participated in these talks in Juba with the Sudan People of Liberation Movement, North Sector, led by Al-Hulu, Abdelaziz Al-Hulu. They became part of the negotiator in the table. So either from the government delegation or the SPLA, the Sudan Liberation Movement, Al-Hulu wing. The challenge was, in fact, that women who were there were two sides or two parts. The first challenge is that the women who were in the negotiation table in the first track, they were nominated by the leaders of the negotiator, meaning that women from the lead senior bosses in the Sudanese movement were participating. Also, two ministers were nominated by the government of Sudan, who were ministers before that, three. The part of the negotiating team. So women at political parties, they're in track 2. The composition is very unique in track 2. It's not only purely civil society, but also there's some women who from movement, people, SPL, and women from the political parties, from CSOs, and they are also politically divided and ideologically. But at the same time, as in track 2, they came into agreement of a gender feminist agenda, which has been advocated within or inside the negotiation table. The challenge, they have some accepted women participation. United Nations also played UN women played major role, and the political mission in Sudan for 1 year managed to push for women participation, financial support for transportation, etc., for travel. As you know, one of the challenges that faces women in peace process is that they to provide some financial support so they can travel, can participate, or to get prepared through training sessions, or to provide them a secure, safe space to sit and discuss with each other and to develop their own agenda. Women managed also, although the United Nations was not the mediator or sponsor of this peace talks, but they are contributor or supporter. So they also pushed for women participation in this process, in this framework. So to some extent, there is kind of success to respond to some demands. But as you can see today, after 25th October, would like to say that women movement, Sudanese women movement, is split already. and divided, because women were politically divided, ideologically divided. You have the civil society more biased or in the revolutionary side, more revolutionist. They're not affiliated to anybody. This created kind of or fragmentation in the women movement in general. It is quite difficult at this transitional phase that all women that reflecting the political reality. As long as there is harmony in the movement, public movement, political movement, this movement will be more harmonized in working together. As long as there is split, women will be also divided, and also they might forget even their feminist agenda and they get involved in politics more in supporting their own parties. This is one of the major risks that faces women movement, feminist movement, and agenda and peace in the current situation in Sudan. We all know that what happened in 25th October, as whatever the naming is it a coup d'etat or military coup d'etat, or and some says it is corrective measures. But however, there is a split among the civil and military authorities. They said some reason, claim some reasons. However, this is a setback in the this transitional phase, because where are we heading to? What then? And how what women in general, the relation with military junta is very bad, because the military ruling for many years was oppressive and violating women's rights, penalties imposed on women, marginalization of women, inability to communicate or association, they closing their space. So this created a very unhealthy relationship between women and the military. So there is kind of rejection to the military rule during this transitional period, because the military ruling for many women is an unsafe environment for strong movement or human rights movement for women. During from 25th October till date, the internet was disrupted. It was locked in Sudan for 3 weeks. About women remain incommunicado for long period, and when the internet service was returned, my own remark is that the women movement now they are moving more towards the revolutionary side. We find that women find it difficult to communicate with each other, because there is lack of confidence in each other. Although during transition period they managed to build and promote confidence among themselves and work together around the feminist agenda. So building or rebuilding and feeling betrayed, and all this has resulted, that has impacted the feminist agenda. At this phase, I cannot respond really. Where is the feminist agenda? Where are women heading to? I cannot answer that. For as Maha mentioned, Maha, I'm looking into Yemen situation, how they are living now in this vicious circle of war, but still women made to succeed. This is a message I'm going to carry with me, takeaway message. No matter how difficult situation is or worse, the women come together and unite, because they will have agenda that brings them together, the minimum possible agenda which could promote relationship among women. This is very difficult transition period Sudan is witnessing. Women rights at stake and questionable feminist movement at stake, because they have been fragmented, as I said, politically. The feminist movement at stake because they lost confidence among each other, and this needs extraordinary efforts to restore this lost confidence. This transitional period was a good chance for Yemeni women, for Sudanese women, to restore many of their rights and to participate in the peace negotiations. although was not in the expected rate like 40 or 50%, but up to 25% participation, representation of women. But the United Nations has contributed, international community has contributed also in encouraging women in participation and involvement in the negotiations table and their involvement in previous talks and negotiations, and wonder if we have another peace negotiations or not, and we're not sure really. This is in brief about how they seen a very sad situation in Yemen for feminist movement in Sudan, and we hope that we are going to monitor and follow up what is going to happen tomorrow to bring together the feminist movement in Sudan to work around feminist agenda. That is why I said in my previous statement, Rasha, that can women to move forward to the level where they can forget or disregard political affiliation and belong only to feminist agenda? Will the feminist agenda will be a priority for women above political agenda? This is the question here. What we see today is that the political agenda is a driving force, unfortunately, which is driving women now more than feminist agenda. This is a very big, major challenge for women in Sudan. Thank you so much, Ms. Magda, for this presentation. A very interesting presentation. It is very painful, really, but very objective, and has described the problem as is, according to the reality. We hope really that the Sudan will overcome these challenges and difficulties. But very important point here I would like to focus here on, because we all as Arab women, this movement, feminist movement, which we have established, managed to some extent to overcome that women will be related or linked to their political parties. Human solidarity included women from different political backgrounds. We tried our best to come on the common denominator, which is peace. If we have women from different political components and parties, we have women from independent women, non-partisan women. And this is, I think, a success for women movement, feminist movement in Yemen. To some extent, we have the agenda which was developed in 2016, and also the roadmap which we developed together, and all the different parties participated in this roadmap. One more point for Yemen is that
الحركة النسوية العربية وخصوصا من المناطق التي تعاني من الصراع، وأعتقد أنه هذا اللقاء
to enhance the Arabic feminist movement in areas that suffer from conflict, and I think this meeting that we have today is in this framework because we have common challenges, we have common issues and problems, and therefore we need to explore the experiences of each other and to benefit from each other.
استعرضت معاهم تجربتكم
successes in different fields, and there
ناشطة حقوقية ومدنية. قولي لنا أيضا التجربة السورية، الصعوبات اللي تعاني لكن أيضا النجاحات التي حققت. تفضلي أستاذة رجاء.
شكرا كثير لك أستاذة حورية، شكرا على الاستضافة، شكرا لكل القائمين بالقمة النسوية الرابعة باليمن، وأحيي جهود النساء اليمنية.
عفوا رجاء، بس دقيقة نتأكد أن الترجمة تعمل. فقط في مشاكل بالترجمة. ممكن الآن نعمل تست سريع، هل بدأت تشتغل بشكل أفضل؟ اللي في الإنجليش channel هل تسمعون تمام الآن الترجمة؟ أوكي طيب ممكن حد يتواصل مع باسم؟ Okay, let me go to the English channel and try. Basim, we can't hear you. I think your connection is bad.
Rasha, I'm going to take over. It seems
I
there
can
are
hear you
some
now, Rasha.
problems.
Go.
Yeah, I'm taking over. Yes, go ahead.
هل الآن الترجمة أفضل؟
هل تسمعون؟
Yes, okay.
رشا بتفضلي احكي بالانجليزي والترجمه تكون
Do you like me to talk in Arabic or English? What do you prefer? As you like. Better in Arabic for the majority are Arabic speakers. Thank you so much.
I'm just asking about the interpretation. Thank you very much for resolving this technical issue. I'd like to thank Ms. Haria for the introduction, and I'd like to thank all the organizers of the 4th Feminist Summit in Yemen for the excellent organization and the excellent efforts they have done in order to include women in the peace process and in the peace building in Yemen. So we have seen some excellent efforts for years, and I hope that these efforts are crowned with broad participation from the Yemeni women in the political process and in the peace building in Yemen. And there could be some direct or indirect participation through different initiatives that you are launching. I'd like to salute you for the women or the feminist peace roadmap and the broad participation we have seen many Yemeni women engaged and included. I'd like to thank you for this efforts, and I appreciate also the work of the Yemeni Advisory Group as well as all civil society organizations and feminist organizations in Yemen for their excellent efforts. I'd like to share with you the experience of the Syrian women and the experience of the Syrian civil society in building peace and the work they are doing. Actually, we are working on a daily basis, and despite the political and economic deterioration in Syria, despite that, there are continued efforts with the support of the local communities. So we may imagine that if women are on the table of the negotiations, they will push forward the peace efforts not only at the national level, but also at the local level. We had the Security Council resolution that was approved in 2015. And there are a number of international resolutions that were issued concerning Syria, women, and the civil society. The line is breaking from her side. The line is breaking from the side of Raja. Raja has an internet connectivity issue. Raja, can you hear us? I think it's better that we move on to Ms. Zahra, and then we can come back. Okay, until we fix things with Raja, we will move now to Ms. Zahra Lange, and she is a very well-known civil society activist. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Libyan Women Platform for Peace, and she is member of the political dialogue in Libya. She is an activist, and we hosted her as to shed light on the experience of the Libyan women, especially in terms of the political dialogue. And she gave us an overview about the situation. And she indicated that the UN mission in Libya played a pivotal role in engaging the Libyan women. Up to 25% of the table was women, and now we are seeing preparations for the Libyan elections, and we understand the magnitude of the challenges facing the Libyan experience. And we want you, Zahra, to convey to us the picture and to tell us what is happening and how can women cooperate to overcome all these hindrances and difficulties. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you and with the different faces you see from Sudan, and from Sanam, Majda from Sudan, Sanam, and we have Russia on top of the list, and Wojood Foundation as well. I'm very happy to be with you, and I would like to salute the activism and the work you are doing. And there must be a kind of more networking in order to share the experiences and the best practices and the lessons learned from different countries. And I'd like to appreciate the work of Friedrich Ebert Foundation, Achim in particular, for supporting this initiative. Frankly speaking, I received the invitation, so I prepared something in English, but I will speak in Arabic. There are two things that I want to raise that are already mentioned by Ms. Majda Sunusi. Well, the feminist piece is about the other story. So it's about the other side of the story. And I am very happy as we are starting now to talk about feminist peace. And we are not talking about engaging women on the table because the tables are designed and are dominated by men. And I'm very happy that we have started talking about the essence of the process, and we are talking about the agenda of the peace process and the design of the peace process. We have started to overcome the discussions about the inclusion of women or the representation, the mere representation of women. The other story is the feminist story, and therefore there needs to be feminist voices in order to form this story. Feminist voices does not mean that these voices are from women. No, they are voices that express the concerns of women. The other idea from Sana I get is the control of the minority. It started by talking about inclusivity. So when we talk about the political process that is sponsored by the UN, it is, in English, we say tokenistic. So they say things, but they do not act upon them. And therefore, they started talking about the inclusive process that includes everyone. And here, what happens on the ground is the same as what happened in Afghanistan when there is empowerment of the minority to rule the country. And I'd like to thank her for the idea of the rule or the control of the minority, because what we see now is the control or the rule of the minority. you see that the minority is in control now. And therefore, when we talk about our vision for the feminist peace, we are accused all the time of being idealistic, and that it's all about theory. It's about the United Nations intervening. No, the table should be inclusive. And but what happens is that on the table we find the warlords, and in order to avoid the blame, they bring some representation of women and they put them on the table, and therefore they establish some secondary tracks for women. So we have had different secondary tracks for women, and we had the experience of Syria, women in the corridor, and our own experience at a certain stage, women were just a decoration on the table, but the real participation was not there. And therefore, how can we make this participation a real participation in order to change the table? And therefore, the women narrative is very important, or the feminist narrative is very important. It has been a year for me in the negotiations, and I have described our latest experience as a disrupting the narrative of spoilers and of patriarchy. So it is disrupting the narrative of the spoilers, or the de facto rulers, the dominant parties, or the rule of minority, or the oligarchs. And therefore, we have to have different tools. It's like a war. When you go into the negotiations, it's not a journey, it's not a vacation, it's a war, and you have to understand the dynamics of power around the table, and you have to understand the rules of the game. You do not need to necessarily accept the rules of the game, but you have to understand them. And therefore, in brief, I say that there are three key things that we need to focus on, which are who and what, and then how. So these three questions are very important. And for us, unfortunately, the women working in peace and security, we always focus on who. We focus on the issue of representation. And even when we have more representation, when one of us understands more, she would say that the qualitative representation is much important than the quantitative representation. But it's all about representation. This is only a fragment. This is a small piece of the process. Yes, representation is very important, and it's very important to have legitimacy and to question how these people were selected, and whether these people do have grassroots and popular support or not. And these people, when they arrive to the table, do they continue their communication with the constituents, and do they have the legitimacy all the time? And therefore, this is the who question. And it's very important not to be happy or satisfied with a quota for women. Yes, numbers are important, and at the end of the peace process, and we have seen this in our experience in the most recent political discussion forum, we go back to the voting process, and therefore numbers are important. Yes, the number representation is very important, but we need to understand the game, and sometimes we face things that are different than what we expect, and therefore the number is very important, the quantity, and the other thing is to have the quality, to have the continued support from the grassroots. And what is important, more important than who is what? Why are we sitting on the table? What are we discussing on this table? And therefore, I believe that we must have a kind of a special vision. We must have our own vision and our own narrative. Why are we on the table? Because if it is about power sharing, we are losing. Because we will live with disgrace and we will be treated as those who rubber stamped the agreements that we do not understand. Most of the agreements, we like it or not, most of the agreements that are presented on the table and the narrative for the feminist peace and the other story has to be about a peace for people. It's not peace between the political elite that is mostly corrupt and wants to share power. So they say all the time the word power sharing, power sharing. No, it's not about power sharing. This is the first idol that has to be destroyed. So we need to disrupt the power sharing narrative. It's not about power sharing. Power sharing, we have seen it in Lebanon that brought the Taif agreement, and it is happening in Libya since 2015. It is being repeated in Sudan and in Yemen. It's about power sharing between a corrupt political elite. And it is about recycling this political elite. And some women actually give it the legitimacy. And therefore, what is on the table is very important. Is it a national agenda? Is it a national project? Are we choosing a national unity government? What is the government? Who is the head of the government? What is the project of the government? Its agenda? What are the basic services that will be provided by the government? And the economic rights, social rights of people. These things should be in the core of the political process. The third issue that is also similarly important is how. We usually think that the how is about logistical arrangements that could be done by the United Nations, and the devil is in the details. So how is very important. How is about the negotiation, and the discussions should not be in closed rooms and behind closed doors and one-to-one. No, this should not happen. The discussion and the negotiation should not happen between or behind closed doors between men by the special envoy or the United Nations, and then women come and rubber stamp it. The discussions and the negotiations must be transparent, and there should be a strategy for communicating with the people. Because when we say that we as women, we are represented, this is very important. It's very important to continue the communication with the grassroots. And this happened in track one, for example. There were women represented in track one, and because of the design of the peace process, what happened was a kind of disconnection between women who came from the civil society. I participated in 2013, 2015, and I participated in the recent round. We succeeded recently because we maintained the communication with the civil society, and we imposed on the United Nations to broadcast all the sessions to the people. And we had other tracks as well, the digital mediation. We had the special envoy listening to the people, asking questions and asking the new government some questions. And here we have the community or the society participation, which is very important. So the last point, which is how, is very important. And I have concluded something last year, which is how to fight corruption. Corruption, sadly, is not only in our societies or in our institutions, but it is also in the United Nations. I have seen that, and all these are institutions, and they need some actions, preventive actions, in actions towards more transparency, accountability, and actions in order to disclose everything, in order to protect the process from the impact and the influence of the corrupt political money. We cannot talk about real and effective participation of women with women agenda as long as there are key obstacles. We have to overcome all these obstacles, and Therefore, we need to understand all these issues, these 3 points, especially the last one, which is the how. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you. And we always like to listen to you for hours and hours, because what you raise is very important. And we are thinking of hosting you individually for hours in order to discuss the details and the small pieces here and there. We go back to Ms. Raja Al-Tali. So do we have Raja? Thank you, Ms. Horia, and I'd like to thank all the Yemeni women for the struggle they are having in order to include the feminist agenda in the peace process in Yemen. First of all, I'd like to say that it is very difficult to summarize the struggle of the Syrian women in 10 minutes. So I will try in these 10 minutes to summarize parts of the story in order to understand what is happening with the Syrian women and the Syrian feminist peace agenda, to push forward the political process and in order to have progress in women's rights. Syrian women and the Syrian civil society are striving to achieve the local peace at the level of local communities. And we want to have active participation for Syrian women on the table of negotiations, because this will push forward the political process on the basis of the UN Security Council 2254 and the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. So in the past 10 years, we have seen some massive efforts by the Syrian women, not only to increase the networking between the Syrian women and the Syrian civil society to achieve progress in the political process. In 2012, we had the Geneva Declaration or statement, and the states that are concerned with the Syrian affair, they produced Geneva I statement, and there was an attempt by the Syrian civil society and Syrian women to increase the awareness about the importance of these international statements and resolutions related to Syria. Primarily, that was in order to ensure participation and to have the voices of the Syrian civil society in the process. Not any voices, but we are talking about the true voices that are pushing forward the political process on the basis of Security Council resolutions, including the resolution 2254, and in order to achieve some gains or to achieve some points, including a comprehensive ceasefire in Syria, including putting an end to the gender-based violence, and to improve the confidence between Syrians in the political process, improving the situation of women, IDPs, refugees, and providing all sorts of support to them and facilitating the access to humanitarian aid. We should never forget that Syria or certain parts of Syria have been subject to political violence and oppression for years and decades probably, and we have seen economic deterioration in Syria, and the Syrian people is suffering from that. And therefore the role we are doing is very important in order to ensure the access to humanitarian aid and to improve the situation of IDPs and refugees, and to implement some voluntary activities and to send back the IDPs to their homes. This is a key principle of human rights, and the Yemeni, the Syrian women and civil society are working towards that. The issue of political prisoners in Syria is very important, and this is a very critical issue in Syria. and we have been working on it. Dozens of thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of Syrians have disappeared, and their loved ones disappeared, and many Syrians are behind bars, and therefore it's very important to focus on this issue. And the Syrian women actually worked on this topic, supported the release of detainees, prisoners, and abductees. So all these efforts are towards confidence building, in order to have more confidence built between Syrians, and in order to build more confidence in the political process. Since the beginning of the political movement in Syria in 2011, we have seen some strong feminist movements in Syria, demanding more support to the civil society and supporting the democratization of Syria. And we have seen movements through different initiatives that were launched. The feminist initiative to support peace and democracy in order to engage women in the political process. This started in 2013 and 2014 when we had Geneva II talks. And after the Security Council Resolution 2254 in 2015, we have seen more movements or momentum towards engaging and including women in the peace process. And we have seen increasing representation for women in the peace process that started in 2016. And the advisory council in Syria was established in order to support the inclusion of women in the peace process. And for the first time, we have established a civil society support avenue in order to provide support to the civil society. So we have seen continued efforts for the Syrian women, especially the advisory council. As a member of the council, we have seen continued efforts to include the feminist agenda in the different points that are being discussed on the table. The political process absolutely requires more support in order to move on by the international parties, especially the constitutional process that is ongoing for 2 years. We have seen efforts to increase the participation of women in the constitutional process and in the constitutional committee. And for the first time, we have an independent delegation from the civil society that is a part of the constitutional committee, and we have a participation. We have about 28% participation from the Syrian women, which is not yet acceptable. We aim at 50% representation of women in the committee, and the constitution is very important for all Syrians, and therefore we want to have a 50% representation for women. We are pushing towards a quota of 30% at least, and we have managed to achieve this increase, and the women representation in the Constitution Committee was increased. So we had 3 mechanisms in Syria in order to increase the women participation in the political process. There are other mechanisms that are conducted in cooperation with the international mechanisms. For example, the formation of the peace circles in different societies with different components.
Solve the local communities' problems. I would like to talk about the space for cooperation experience, which brings different ladies together from or the activists in track 1, 2, and 3, bring them together to support women participation and presence at the different arenas. I would like to talk also about the other experience, or which is the participation of Syrian women and civil society in providing and delivering the briefings to the Security Council. Would like to continue with these efforts to shed light on the different solutions, on the different problems, and the political situation, humanitarian situation, miserable humanitarian situation in Syria most of the time. And also, I have provided a map as part of my debriefing to the Security Council in 2019 January to solve the Syrian crisis. 6 points, 3 points I've mentioned about confidence building between Syrians, and also contribute to building confidence in the political process. And other 3 points are or include support in reaching into political agreement between different parties, ensure establishment of accountability mechanisms, separation of powers, and redistribution of power based on the outcomes of the negotiations, human rights, women's rights, and all freedoms, including these religious freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, guarantee the for political parties formation, etc., civil society, building common Syrian identity based on diversity by all Syrians from all communities, and gender, race, gender, ethnicity, etc. We would like to accept more efforts together with the participation between Syrian women who are exerting a very tremendous effort at the local level and their communities, not only their geographical community, but also in other communities in which they're working hard to progress with Syria forward. But it's very important for women, Syrian women, to participate in decision-making process, which is still poor and very low. And for these are the reasons that some might be. It's very important to include wider participation of women. Thank you so much, Ms. Horia. During the Q&A session, I might talk in details also, if you wish. Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Raja, for this presentation. And you have provided us the brief to the Security Council was very focused on the specific points, and this is really wonderful. Know that also Yemeni women has provided the briefing to Security Council about the situation in Yemen, about their role in peace building. But you have raised a very important point, and included in the feminist roadmap, that this roadmap, it is gender and human rights based. So it is based on the human rights and the gender also. So this many different components might lack this when talking about peace. They're not taking into account these issues. The transitional justice, accountability, etc., are very important issues. In fact, we don't have much time left, but the major, most important questions that will be asked to the panelists, and we have 2 more speakers going to speak from this track. We have 30 minutes. I'll give the most important questions raised or asked, and the one who is concerned could respond immediately. Who can respond just can jump in and answer. The questions: what are the personal experiences in participating in peace process, and how we can involve women in the peace talks, and how do you assess the international role in supporting feminist organizations? Do you think, Ms. Zahra, do you think that the conditions you have provided for participation and representation and are only for women involvement, or conditions for all men and women? These conditions. Third, can you please share with us some feminist initiatives on conflict resolution in Yemen, Syria, and how can we deal with the religiously extremist parties that ban women participation? These are the questions. So could Ms. Raja is here. If you can respond to any of these questions, please go ahead. I propose 2 to 3 minutes to respond. So we'll have more time for discussion. Ms. Raja, please go ahead. Thank you so much, Ms. Horia. I'd like to thank all the participants for these important questions they have raised. When we're talking about the conditions for women participation in this peace process, it's as if this it's anticipated that as if these conditions are for women only. When we're talking about conditions for participation, so we're talking about all participants, or otherwise should not talk about conditions for first place for women only, because this is the beginning of marginalizing women from the or marginalizing in the political process. So the mechanism, different mechanisms that could or advice that we could give to Yemeni women or in general, women in general from different conflict areas. I would like to say that increase the knowledge is very important, not only among women. Increase your knowledge about your communities, because the women's role is very important to be it should be legitimate by their communities. They should feel the value of your role, should sense the value of your roles. So we should work hard in increasing the knowledge with our communities. This is very basic. Also to increase knowledge and skills for women only, for us or for all of us. For instance, our participation in the Feminist Summit, this will increase our knowledge and skills. Exchange of experience also is something important and very important, because by that we're going to contribute by one way or another to expand our understanding, our different means through which we can participate. So the skills also focus on the technical skills. It's like for mediation, negotiation, and some technical also skills to increase, to ensure increasing of women participation. Relations is very important also. Not always the international relations what matters, or at the national level only. The relationship that could contribute to manifest and define and causing an impact in the local community. For instance, I heard about different Yemenis experiences who they managed to release some detainees and abductees. This is really important, and this happened because there is good relationship and there is major role played by women, Yemeni women. Also, some initiatives made by Yemenis women, also in Syria. We have some initiatives in this area, in this respect, initiatives to cease fire. So the relationship at the local level contributed greatly in that led us to achieve this goal, that is to maintain the life of civilians, preserve the life of civilians, and the women, men, and all citizens. So this relations is very essential. So make sure to increase relationship. This is my advice to you. Also, I'd like to say one final point. One of the participants asked that is to increase the confidence building among women and within feminist movement. This is very important, very significant issue, and requires effort and time. And any one of us could contribute in increasing confidence among different women, and among should work together to build to develop a better agenda for women's rights in our country, being Syria, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, and I wish you all the success. Thank you, Ms. Raja. I'm going to move to Ms. Dr. Balqis Abu Asba. She is a professor of politics in Sana'a University. She was deputy chairperson of the Supreme National Anti-Corruption Committee in Yemen. She will have 2 minutes to 3 minutes before I move to Ms. Zahra. If Ms. Zahra Balqis is here, because she raised her hand some time ago. Dr. Balqis, if you are there, please go ahead and ask your question. If she is not there, move to Ms. Zahra. Meanwhile, thank you so much for this positive response and this important questions. I'm going to start with the question about the conditions of participation, legitimacy of participation, whether these conditions are the same for men. It should be this. It should supposed to be the same conditions. But let us say something. Women, when involved in negotiations table, they may come as part of shared civil society. More majority of the civil society, when they give a share to participate in the negotiations, it will come under the share women, and part of them are men, youth. Although there are some women who came as representative of women, the interest community plays in this area, as if the civil society is women, as if the civil society is women. And then you see some women who are representing warlords, for instance. Here, I would like to say that this need to be some analysis. It is very important, of course. We formed a very critical block of women, and we've involved youth with us, representatives of the CSO, civil society. We managed to move something like 30% of women. But when it comes to, for instance, to the conditions, who should be at the presidency or the prime minister, you will see these women who represent warlords. She will not agree with you in feminist agenda, because I believe the feminist agenda, I should understand first what is the feminist agenda. The feminist agenda is not about the or be just reduced to the women's rights. You can meet with women, all women, from different backgrounds, partisan, political backgrounds, political backgrounds, and you can to defend women's rights. This is possible, but you cannot, with women, other women, will not be able to defend a feminist agenda in a sense that will not accept militarization. When now, for instance, we develop some criteria for selecting the executive power, for instance, that represent warlord or militia or military men or junta, all these criteria will be disrespected, which are related to human rights. The feminist agenda is human rights agenda by virtue. So you could do some coalition with some women, but not all women. You could do some coalition with men, but who has a feminist rights perspective. This is very important to understand. So when developing these conditions, not the United Nations only, we understand the coalition around the table, from there we should be careful that should not count the women who came to represent militia or warlord. She's not going to support your agenda. You might agree in some areas, but we want to increase those who support the feminist peace agenda. Okay, but first we increase the feminist peace agenda. The international rule, let us say, is double standard role for women issue. It is just for cosmetic purposes. This committee is not committing to that. Let us understand that. We always hold them accountable. And I'm going to speak here about first question. Our role as women at the negotiation table, we're not part of the cake. We would not like to change the recipe of the cake itself. We do not want to take a slide of the cake. You might get a slide similar to his share of the cake. But here, I would like to identify the basis of my participation, to develop peace process based on economic, social rights for the people in general, not only to be part of the game. The other question about, as I did the research, I participated in the first track, and I felt that if the first track lacks the base, like some women, they are local peace mediators. They are the one who worked with the tribes. And now we're working with tribes. About women and issue and security, to say that is westernized agenda, and talking about 1325 resolution as if this resolution came from United Nations only, as Sana said that the one who developed 1325 are the efforts of the civil society from different cultures. So this is what we have to say, even to the tribe sheikhs. Our discourse is kind of superior. Our approach should be a big based, community-based approach, on which you can build and work with the tribesmen and women. Some of them might not recognize that they are mediators, but they're doing efforts more significant than ours. They're working with tribesmen. In communities like Libya and Yemen, we should have women who start working with tribes. Thank you so much. الصوت مسكر يا أستاذة حورية، الميكروفون مسكر. Thank you so much. Now we'll move to Miss Sanam from ICANN. I think she has something to add. Please, Sanam, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to echo, and I shared with you on the in this chat a report that we published last year, and the issue that we're trying to raise is essentially two things that are tied together. Number one, this agenda has never, as far as I can tell you, in terms of my involvement and in terms of when it came from the ground up, it was never about just generically saying women should be there. There was always a recognition that we have women on the ground who become peace actors, who run to the problem. Not all women are peace actors, right? But in all conflicts, we see women who emerge as peace builders and peace actors, and they run to address the problems. So if we think about it from a global platform of WPS, Women, Peace and Security, it's really important to recognize that aspect. That's I think one thing. And the work that we've done in the last few years at ICANN is to say, what does it mean to be a peace builder? Because there are elements of human rights to it, but it's also elements of engaging with armed actors. It's elements of being mediators, of being interlocutors, of using culture, of using religion, of using law, but essentially always driving towards the goal of trying to end the conflict, trying to bring accountability, trying to bring responsibility and protection and care for the communities. That's women peace builders. And everybody that I work with, whether Rasha, Raja, Zara, all of you implicitly do this. But unless and until collectively and internationally we recognize that we are peace builders, it's very hard to keep pushing the argument of women should be at the table, because of course, as Zara said, what happens is that they bring all the other parties bring women. You know, we have it in the United States right now. We have some of the most conservative, regressive women being fronted, and of course they're anti issues of rights or peace or anything like that. So the question of saying we want to recognize women peace builders is important. And as peace builders, they are, or you are, those of you who are on the ground, are actors. You may not be violent actors, you're not using weapons, but you are actually actors on the ground in the arena of conflict and in the arena of peacemaking. So this recognition, I think, is really important. The second piece of this, and it's related, is that if we recognize that there are women peace builders, and again, as Zara said, there may be men peace builders, there may be all sorts of people's peace builders, but peace builders in communities where war is happening, those peace builders must have their own independent delegations to peace talks. It's not enough to say, we're going to have the army on, the government on one side and a militia or the armed group on the other side, and each of these entities should have 3 women and 2 young men and so forth. That is a recipe for failure. That's exactly what happened in Afghanistan. The government was forced to they had 25 people, and they had young people, and they had 4 women, and they had tribes, and they had political opposition and so forth. And the Taliban had 50% Taliban. This framing of a two-side of making conflicts or making peace processes seem as if they are just two sides, as if it's a football game of armed group and government, is a fallacy. It's unrealistic. It has no bearing on the reality and the complexity on the ground. And at a minimum, the demand should be to have the voices and inclusion of peace actors as a separate group and delegation at the table. Once you have that, the kinds of issues you're talking about in terms of feminist peace or the concerns and the types of things that come up in the roadmap or that emerge from peace tables, this delegation can bring them forward. So this is the argument I think that we should be collectively making. And I would end with one last thought, that we in our communities and internationally, we talk about feminist peace. That I think it's very important to bring that lens. But we also have to recognize that in many places and in many contexts, A, there's confusion about what feminist means. And B, many people can turn around and say, well, feminism is a political ideology in the same way that Islamist ideology is there, right? And we don't want to get stuck in having to defend it as a political ideology or having to get stuck in explaining what we mean by feminism. So part of the strategy has to be to actually unpack the issues and challenge actors to say, you know, whether you're Muslim, whether you're coming from a tribal background, whatever background you're coming from, what culture says that children should be killed? What culture says that the elders or the adults should not be taking care, or the elite should not be taking care of their communities? Everywhere we look, when you look at the culture, you see that. So draw on the strength of the cultural context, draw on the strength of whatever positive issues arise from tribal relationships or religious or doctrine or whatever in the pursuit of peace and justice, because it all exists, and we can't just let the other side claim that and then box women into, oh, you're Western, oh, you're alien, etc. These things I think we need to bear in mind. But talking about women peace builders, I think, is a really important element of distinguishing from the space that we're in and saying women are peace builders, women are actors. As actors, they need to be at the peace table where peace is being negotiated. All the research shows that when we're present in a significant way, we make a positive difference to peace. If there are peace processes where women are not present as peace builders in their own right, those peace processes will fail. We know that. And this brings it to our governmental allies. If they're serious about feminist foreign policy, if they're serious about their national action plans on women, peace and security, this is a minimum that they should be asking for: women's independent delegations at peace tables. They shouldn't sponsor peace talks that don't have that. They shouldn't sponsor UN entities and others that don't have that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanam, for this intervention.
شكرا جزيلا.
الآن سأدعو السيدة.
Now I'm going to call upon Miss Majda Sanusi in 2 minutes to respond, to 3 minutes to respond to any question that needs to be answered by her. Miss Majda, please, the floor is yours. Sorry, what was the question, Horia? If there are a number of questions, in fact, here, but the question which might be related, what the advice that would give to Yemeni women, noting that we are trying to build a women alliance. This question to you, Ms. Mag. The advice you could provide to us in this respect. Thank you so much. Before us, I saw the question, one question here in the chat. I will try to mention from my own personal experience during the peace talks, either in Sudan or in Libya. Women, they used to come with specific demands to be part of feminist agenda. This is very technical issue, and that women should work on that strongly, meaning that women should present, for instance, to be represented by 50% or incriminate violence against women, for instance, whatever the case is, the issue is. So when women sit together with these demands inside the negotiations table or halls, the mechanism of agreeing or peace agreement normally is built on the consensus, So there is no voting system. So people will not vote inside the negotiation halls about Article 1 or Article 2 or whatever. What will happen? What happens normally? When women raise issues or representative issue or a specific demand, or sharing of economic resources at specific X rate percentage. When these issues are presented or addressed, then no one will going to respond. When there is issue, they reach into consensus. They say we agree, but when it comes, when talking about women, talk to women, they keep silent. They don't talk to women. So the internal mechanisms need to be addressed strongly. The UN voice, I think they're facing many challenges, meaning that if the negotiations started and identified specific number from both sides, this what happened, like 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever, what happens normally, the men share these seats, even they encourage to bring women with them because they are faced the challenges of ownership. So they choose their own team. When they choose their team in our masculine community, they not choose women, of course. So you will not find a fair representative and balanced representative of women in the negotiation table. So what happened? The envoy will be face the burden to increase 1 or 2 more seats and request them to bring women in these seats. So this needs work within the women and business security issue, meaning that this issue need to be obligatory and to add a specific rate of representative to be committed by all member states or countries in conflict. I think this is women here will ensure their rights, either representative or including their demands or rights in the peace agreement, because the mechanisms are not fair. This mechanism, particularly the consensus mechanism in which the peace agreement is built, about the ladies from Yemen, my sisters from Yemen, I think the most important thing is to believe that women can build their strong alliances, particularly the blocks through the different organizations, alliances. They have good chances also, because I believe Yemeni women were they went through the difficult experience of war, so they have kind of solidarity among themselves. However, not go back then with the same cycle, which is the inclusion issue and comprehensiveness. We have seen that in all our countries. For instance, in Libya, all the women who belongs to who are affiliated to or pro-Gaddafi were rejected by other women, or women who were members of the National Congress or the former regime. So inclusiveness has to be determined by the feminist movement or some lack of acceptance of some groups who help it in women oppression and they're members of the former regimes. Since this includes inclusion, we're talking about also, so they'll be excluded also, as you can see that, and how Yemeni women and how far Yemeni women could be able to build their blocks or alliances, and they can cross the borders and can bring women from different governorates and attract them from different backgrounds or ideologies towards one issue, towards peace. And I hope this will be possible. About establishing political party for women, this need through study and to explore the viewpoints of the local communities or men. So having political party led by women, but open the membership to men and women be less risky for Libyan women.
Well, there should be movements around all issues in which women believe. Women actually gather around the things that are of interest to them, and the thing that women agree on around the world is that women are discriminated against. There is gender inequality between men and women, and women should demand their rights and should demand equality. This is the agenda that unifies women not only in our areas but around the globe. And therefore, the movement should be built on what we agree on and not around what we disagree on, because the political issues create divisions between women. Yes, you have responded briefly, and well, your response was more than enough. And I want to remind you that the women's solidarity and the women consensus, we have taken into account that it should be representative of all women from different political backgrounds. We in the national unity movement, national consensus movement, we have invited all political parties to participate. We have had some frictions in the past. One of the members in the women's solidarity, she criticized the revolution in Yemen and the revolutionists, and we were oppressed by the past regime, but we did not want to enter into that debate that may lead us to more fragmentation. We tried to push consensus, and we wanted to have consensus, but we wanted this consensus to be on fair basis. And even if we meet on the common divisors, in the transitional justice or in the transitional period or before it, we have to insist on establishing a system for transitional justice. Yes, we have disagreements, but we are facing some daunting challenges facing our countries, and therefore we have to heal our wounds and we have to move on. We need to agree on the points that bring us together. I'll move now. Before I move to Ms. Maha, she will be the last speaker. After her, we will have Dr. Al-Ubaid speaking. So from this platform, I would like to say to Dr. Amat Al-Alim Susua, I wish to condole her in the death of her nephew. She is not with us today. She was supposed to be with us. She is the former Minister of Human Rights, and she was the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. She is a prominent woman leader in Yemen. She is the founder of the Yemeni Women Committee, and she has a long history of supporting the feminist movement. So we convey to her our condolences. I'm not supporting the idea of establishing a feminist party. Well, we need to strengthen the Yemeni feminist movement, but establishing a purely feminist party, no. We have to have mainstreaming, and we have to have women present in all political parties and forces in the country. We'll have now Ms. Maha. She has questions directed to her. She will respond to them. Please, Maha. I'd like also to clarify something concerning the Feminist Summit. What is unique about it is that we brought all the representatives of different political parties and forces in the country. So in the country, we have about 38 political parties, networks, and forces, and we brought them together. We also brought together the feminist organizations and feminist initiatives. And a key thing is that we have accumulated experiences in the feminist movement. We have social figures, and we had representation from political or partisan women. And for the partisan women, there is an outcome from the third feminist summit after the shock women had when they were completely excluded from the current government. The women from different political parties, they convened, and we have established this forum for women representing different political parties, different ideologies. And this forum by itself, or this congregation, is a point of strength because it brings together different women from political parties and from civil society organizations in order to push forward the feminist agenda. And we want to continue this achievement and to build on it through this summit. And we want to consolidate the efforts of all the feminist activists. We also want to have empowerment of women within the structures of different warring parties because women can meet, can talk to each other in order to achieve peace. And we want to achieve that. And the Feminist Summit is an event that is advancing and progressing every year. And I'd like here to express our gratitude and appreciation to our partners, Friedrich Ebert, who started with us the first summit, and today we have the fourth summit, and we are seeing more representation, more inclusion, more diversity in every summit. We have representation from different governments, different parties, different communities, different social and cultural segments. That was amazing. And therefore, we can say that women can build themselves as a movement, and therefore, this deserves that we unify all the efforts, and the international community has to rethink about the participation and inclusion of women by providing funding to them, economic empowerment in order to have true participation in the peace process. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Maha, for this concise, brief presentation. And there is a question here about how can women participate? Well, it's in your hands. It's your responsibility. I believe don't wait for others to invite you. You'll not be invited, and therefore we have to take the lead. And we have countries that are fragmented, destroyed, and destructed, and therefore we have to build these countries. We do not need to be invited. We need to take the initiative, and we need to ally with each other, network, and to coordinate nationally, regionally, and internationally. And we are the ones who should be looking for solutions. And now, the next speaker is a very dear person to us, all of us in Yemen. He is Dr. Al-Ubaid Ahmed Al-Ubaid. He is a Yemeni and Sudanese. He lived in Yemen for a long period of time. Everyone in Yemen knows Dr. Al-Ubaid. Everyone in the civil society has dealt with Dr. Al-Ubaid. He knows the Yemeni society and knows all the civil society organizations. His relations with the Yemenis are very strong and deep-rooted. And the latest post for him in Yemen, he worked with the UNDP. And the latest position for him was the representative he was the head of the office for the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner in Yemen. And he is now with the board of directors of the Peace Track Initiative. Our dear brother, Dr. Al-Ubaid, you have the floor. Thank you, Ms. Horia. Actually, I'm flattered by this introduction. Thank you very much. And I would like to salute each of you. First of all, I'd like to clarify that I am not adding anything to what has been stated by Horia, Majda, and Maha, and others. I'm trying in this brief presentation to raise some points. I start with the points raised by Ms. Majda Sanusi, as we belong to the same Sudanese tribe, the tribe of Sudanese who love Yemen. So one of the lessons learned from Sudan is that the strength of the feminist movement in Sudan imposed on international organizations to support and help this movement. So the support that was provided by the external community was, yes, a success factor, but the key thing was the inherent strength of this feminist movement in Sudan. And this contributed to receiving more support and to have more international support to it, because there was a self-initiative that started and that built momentum. And the second thing that is happening in Sudan, which is directly related to what is happening in Yemen, one of the reasons for the success of the Sudanese revolution, of course, the Sudanese revolution is still ongoing. One of the success factors of it is the active participation of women, not the political participation, but the participation in the sacrifice, the presence of women in the revolution was as victims, as those whose rights were violated and breached, and therefore this was a key element in the revolution in Sudan, which is the sacrifice women provided or made, and this was impactful in the success of the Sudanese revolution in toppling the regime. Majda stated that we managed to achieve successes in a very short span of time, and women now are occupying very important posts. The foreign minister and the finance minister are women, and we are seeing more women included in the government at different levels. And there is a kind now of a political maturity in the country. Probably in the near future, we will have a female prime minister. And this will be something very positive for Sudan and its revolution. So I hope that we do not focus on the divisions. There are divisions in the feminist movement, yes, but these divisions are also endemic in other movements that are non-feminist movements, and therefore this is something very normal. What is important is that we agree on the common frameworks, regardless of the political affiliations. We need to agree on the common frameworks. Based on that, I believe that emphasizing on this point is very important. I mean here focusing on the things that bring us together. And I believe that the roadmap that is proposed now is a very good start, because at the end, it's a roadmap that combines peace with human rights. And when we talk about human rights, these are the human rights that include everyone. And therefore, in order to achieve peace, we need to connect peace to human rights with the different elements of it. And I believe that this approach is the right platform, not only for women, but for all those who are working for peace in Yemen. And therefore, I believe that having a roadmap as a reference is very important. Even if people do not agree on all elements of it, having this platform is very important. And we need to not focus on the representation in delegations or different conferences here and there. We need to build this foundation, which is the roadmap, and we base everything on it. So this is what I wanted to say. The importance of the peace roadmap as a foundation to act towards peace in Yemen, based on the idea that this could be the reference for women and for men alike. It's a very important reference, and I think it can be agreed upon, and we can build coalitions around it. So this is what I wanted to add. I had the honor of participating in the previous summit that was in Aden, and I'd like to thank Ms. Maha for that. And I would like to convey my greetings through her to the group of women in Aden who presented role models actually in political activism and human rights activism. I wish them all peace, and I wish Yemen all peace. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Al-Ubaid, for this presentation, and thank you for your good feelings towards Yemenis. You are a dear brother to us. You and Majda, before I hand over the floor to the head of the Peace Track Initiative head, Rasha Jarhum, I'd like to congratulate my dear sister, Majda, of her birthday today. And Susan Al-Rifa'i, we have her as participant. It's her birthday, and for Rasha, I say to her, many happy returns. Rasha, you have the floor.
شكرا جميعا.
Thank you, everyone. It was an excellent discussion and rich discussion, and all these national and regional efforts, we hope that they bear fruits. We see some strategic work in the future. I'd like to thank each of you, thank all the participants, and I thank you for all the questions you raised. I thank you for being patient with us and for continuing with us until this hour. Thank you. Goodbye.
الله يخليك. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا. هلو.
شكرا.
هلو.